Hi, I'm Wendy from Shiny Happy World, and in this video I'm going to show you what I mean by quilting from the center out. I actually get a lot of questions about this, like what specifically does that mean? And I think a lot of the confusion comes from the fact that it means something different whether you're hand quilting or machine quilting, and I'm going to show you what it means for both of those options here. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of different options here for what I mean when I talk about quilting your quilt, starting in the center and working your way out. Now the way you do this is different if you're doing hand quilting or if you're doing machine quilting, and I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes in. So I'm going to show you first how to do this when you're hand quilting. So when you're hand quilting, you actually start right in the middle of the quilt. I've laid this sample grid out, my little pretend quilt here, and this is a big block that I would frame up in my Q-snap frame. And then you do start quilting. You don't have to start dead center in the quilt, so it's not like you have to start, working your way around in the center like that and you have to work from the exact center of the quilt out. That's not what people mean. They just mean that you are going to work from, let me go ahead and clear that out. You're going to work from the center block out to the next blocks out. So you could start in this center block here and you might be doing lines that go across. I want this to snap to my grid. So you might start in this center block and you're going to do maybe lines that go across like this, and that's okay. You're still starting in the center and working your way out. So then after I finish that middle block, I would move to any of these blocks that are around it. So maybe I would move onto this block next, and I would do my quilting pattern, whatever quilting pattern you want to do. You're just working from the center block out to the next blocks out. And then I would not do this end block next. I would finish working all of these blocks that are around the center block. So I would just keep hooping up all the way around that center start. And I would finish all of these blocks that go around that middle block before I do any of the blocks on the outside edge. Okay, so now let me get rid of that and we'll start a new one. So now it's a little different when you're talking about machine quilting. So machine quilting, you never want to start in the middle, because if you start in the middle, let me go back and show this one again. If you start in the middle, every time you start and stop a line of quilting, you're going to have to do a couple of back stitches, and it's just going to be an enormous pain and really not very fun at all. Anytime you're machine quilting, you really want to go all the way from the edge of the quilt to the edge of the quilt. So I'll hide my hand quilting guide again, and now I'm going to go back to my machine quilting. So on most of my quilts, I do the quilting in the individual blocks before I sew them together. The only time I'm quilting the entire quilt top is after I've added the back to it. And then I do tell you to go from the center to work your way out. Now, there is no seam line on the center here, and when I'm doing my quilt as you go quilts, I'm only quilting in the ditch. So what I'm going to do is start with the first seam line out from the center, and I'm going to quilt from one edge to the other edge. And then I'm going to go back up, so I'm working from the center out to the edges. So now I'm going to do this edge to the outer edge. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to work from the center out on the other side. And then I'm going to turn the quilt. Let's see, let's go ahead and rotate this whole image. So now I'm going to turn the quilt sideways through my machine, and I'm going to do the exact same thing going in the opposite direction. I'm going to go start as close as I can to the center and work my way out to the edge. And then I'm going to go back to the center and work all the way out to the edge. And if I needed to do closer quilting, if I was doing like a big broomstick quilt or something like that, I would do the same thing, I'm going to start off again here with a clean slate. Then I would go from the center out to the edge. And if you're doing actually really tight quilting in there, again, usually when I'm machine quilting, I'm doing pretty loose quilting and I'm just stitching over my seam lines. But if you want to do really tight quilting, you need to do it spaced farther apart first, and then cut those sections in half. And then, let me get all the way across here. And then you cut those sections in half again. If you just go one and then another one really close to that and another one really close to that, you're going to tend to have puckery lines that form. It's going to make the entire surface of the quilt kind of drag down in one direction. So you do need to, you can't work entirely from the center out. You've got to do it in chunks. But that's only if you're doing really tight quilting, like that little matchstick quilting that's only like 1/4 of an inch apart. So after I finish going in one direction, if I finished that as much as I wanted to, then I would work from the center out on the other side. So you're working from the center out, but instead of working from the actual center of the quilt, you're working from the center line of the quilt. So that's the difference between machine quilting and hand quilting. Hand quilting, you actually are going from the center of the quilt, working your way all the way out to the edge, and then finally those outside blocks. And that's it. So that's it. If you're hand quilting, quilting from the center out means literally starting with the center block of your quilt, quilting that block, and then moving to the next block out, quilting all the way around that center block, and then moving out again and working from the center block out to the edges of the quilt. If you're machine quilting, it means starting with a center line and then working your way out toward the sides, but always working from edge to edge. I'm Wendy from Shiny Happy World. I'll see you next time.